Tom, we've been talking about this passport thing. I want to play this and then we can move on. So today in the House of Commons, Pierre Poilievre, Justin Trudeau, what are they fighting about today? The change in the passport. Pierre Poilievre accusing at one point the Prime Minister of abandoning veterans because, of course, they've removed the image of Vimy Ridge, et cetera, et cetera. This was Justin Trudeau's retort to that accusation. Brian?
Right now, Mr. Speaker, veterans across the country are being reminded of what the Conservatives did around veterans. They wrap themselves in the flags and the symbols anytime they can. But in fact, they nickeled and dimed our veterans. They used them for photo ops. They shut down 9 veteran service offices across the country so they could try and save a little money through cuts. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have always disrespected veterans while they wrap themselves in the imagery. We're going to continue to deliver for the veterans every single day.
Well, a little heated there. That's a pretty angry Justin Trudeau. So, Tom, what do you think?
I think that Trudeau knows that there's a very serious weakness there in Poilievre's record because he was part of that government with Stephen Harper. What he said about shutting down those regional offices, absolutely true. At the time, the vets were furious about it. They moved on. But it's absolutely fair ball for Trudeau and the Liberals to go white hot over this thing and to push back very strongly against any suggestion that somehow the Conservatives are morally superior. I have to say, to be fair to what happened at the time, Veterans Affairs was certainly one of the worst run ministries in the government. It was just something that had grown like Topsy. They let it just get out of control in terms of the public administration, the number of programs, the number of people. And Harper did his best to try to start reeling it back in. So that's the background story. But hey, that took me almost 30 seconds to say that whole thing, and nobody pays attention to that. So they'll remember Trudeau's rant, and Trudeau's rant was absolutely fair, all things considered.
I wonder if Pierre Poilievre sort of regretted the fact that he brought it up in the first place. But
I think so. Although he's going to have to start getting used to it because the people around Trudeau are going to have to stiffen Trudeau's spine and make sure that he does this stuff a little bit more often because he can't keep leaving, the entire skating rink with no goalie and a bucket full of pucks to Poilievre to fire at an empty net. So yes, they're going to have to learn how to fight on the same ground.
Love that reference.
I like that too.
Wow.
But I got to just say, does it not feel like we're already into an election cycle? Like it feels like that.
Well, where did I hear that? Somebody saying that maybe Trudeau would go for an election this fall. On CJAD 800.
Yeah, you might have heard me say that after you said it, Tom. I think that's what you're referring to. Yeah.
I still think Trudeau's doing everything he can to keep that door open. Little prediction here based on some inside information out of Ottawa. Trudeau's probably going to pull the plug and do what we call prorogation. It's that thing that we went through with Harper when he wound up begging Mulcair, then Governor General, to give him the ability to suspend Parliament because it's a very formal thing, prorogation. That means that the Parliament and everything that's being done gets the heave-ho and then you start over again. That would give the Liberals an unbelievable advantage this summer because, of course, the Conservatives and the Bloc, and to a smaller extent the NDP, are planning to use their majority to continue convening parliamentary committees during the summer and keep the show going on Chinese government interference and things like that. Well, lo and behold, if you suspend Parliament and you're waiting for a throne speech to come back, none of those committees exist anymore. So Trudeau could have a double, a 2-scoop ice cream cone. The first is he flushes all these parliamentary committees. They're not a thorn in his side anymore. And he and his ministers get to travel the country all summer long on the public dime, making smiling announcements. We're spending money here. We're building a community center there. We've made a deal with your city hall here, across the country. And that's, of course, the ramp up to an election in the fall. One of the things that would be possible for Trudeau is to do the throne speech, go through the whole rigmarole, and then pull the plug and go to an election if he decided that the timing is right. And I'm still convinced that Trudeau himself, personally, that he's convinced that he can take on Poilievre. I'm not sure everybody who organizes for him is yet of that view, but Trudeau has ultimate confidence that he's going to be able to thump Pierre Poilievre.
Let's just backtrack for a quick second about the passports. We took calls on this and people were surprisingly passionate about it. What's your stance? How do you feel about them doing away with images like Terry Fox and Vimy Ridge?
I'm going to take a step back from that and talk about the following simple question. Who decides? So whether it's getting rid of the fleur-de-lis on the Canadian crown that sits atop our coat of arms, as Trudeau did last Saturday, by the way, that didn't go over very well at all. Or it's something like this, getting rid of the imagery. This is the type of thing that is catnip to Poilievre's base. This is wokeism. This is getting rid of the symbols of the past and replacing it with a squirrel. And, what exactly is the reason for removing Terry Fox? Those are the types of things. So on the one hand, yes, refreshing things is a good idea. But who's responsible for this? Is it an anonymous committee of bureaucrats, or is it somebody who's actually got to stand up in the House and answer for it? Under Trudeau, we've lost the basic notion in our parliamentary democracy of ministerial responsibility. That's the bedrock of our system. It's based on the British model. So nobody's ever responsible for anything. So you get bureaucrats making this type of decision, and good luck trying to find out which committee at which point simply decided that they were going to be the ones to decide to get rid of these symbols. So I think that it was a mistake, or they should have been replaced with other iconic symbols. But when you're getting rid of your history, as they did by getting rid of the fleur-de-lis on the Canadian crown, because guess what? Even though we're now in a very multicultural society with 2 official languages, the history of the country is of 2 founding peoples. And they want to get rid of that. That doesn't fit with their narrative, so they get rid of the fleur-de-lis and the crosses, by the way. And same thing here. Just get rid of those symbols. That's the past. We're sweeping all that away. Justin's here. He'll save us. Everything's going to be fine. I think it was a mistake, and he's the one who should be responsible for it. But, of course, he won't be.
Okay. Tom, let me switch gears here to talk a little bit about provincially what's going on. We have our first ever commissioner of the French language in Benoit Dubreuil, who I think is on with Elias tomorrow morning.
10 a.m.
So here's the deal. He says, and I guess remember, this is kind of new to a job, new to a created position. He says it's all about finding the right balance, which I think is perhaps the best way to describe something that you can't possibly describe in terms of what your job is going to entail. So what do you think about, first of all, him, if you know him, and second of all, about what his job here is going to be?
I only knew him through his writings, but I had a chance to meet him at that big Congress that took place this week the one that I was attending and then taking part in and giving a speech in, had to do with language policy and the history of the court cases around language and things like that. He's a very engaging fellow, clearly very studious because he's sat there taking notes the whole time. A lot of people referenced him, but he was very modest. He was just there taking notes, and I think that that's his approach to these things. He's in a learning process. He's talking slow. He didn't jump in front of the microphones right away, as some people would want to do. He took his time, and he's thoughtful, again, as I say, and I think that this guy's going to do quite well. We've got Eric Girard, an equally thoughtful person who's the minister responsible for relationships with the English-speaking community. We don't hear a heck of a lot from Eric Girard, and not much has actually happened. But Dubreuil is going to be on top of these complex files, and what I like about him is that he's the type who seems to understand that since it's complex, you can't just have foregone conclusions and root around for a little bit of evidence to prove you're right. We went through so much of that in the past week around the whole question of immigration and language and whether, we're going to disappear. The French language is in dire straits and everything like that. That's my paper, by the way, that just went online it's online now, but it'll be in tomorrow's paper version of the Journal de Montréal. I think it's time that we have more nuanced discussions about this very complex and emotional issue and less reflex answers that really don't lead anywhere.
I don't know if you saw the discussion or the interview, I guess, that had been done. The Gazette got one with Jean-François Roberge. And the first line of this said, I kind of shook my head saying, we've not really talked a lot about this at all. All of a sudden, it says, because the new language policy comes into effect June 1st, proof of eligibility will not be required for those seeking services in English when this policy comes into effect. This is what we were kind of pulling our hair out when Bill 96 was introduced, saying the devil was in the details. And now here's the minister saying you're not going to need a card or a certificate or anything like that. And he's saying this to reassure Anglos. What do you think?
Yeah, well, talk about how complicated it is. Because I still work in this field as a lawyer, I can tell you that the stuff that's coming out of the language bureaucracy right now is actually, some parts of it is reassuring compared to the worst case scenarios that we were looking at while we were still trying to imagine what it was going to look like. But at the same time, it is incredibly complex. So you're talking about something that affects somebody who moves here from Australia and who's been told, well, you've got 6 months to master the French language so you can fill out those forms in French, otherwise too bad, even though the English service exists. But that's only for, as my friend Aaron would say, historic Anglos. So at the same time, you've got businesses that are trying to decode what's going on here. And we're going to wind up, Aaron and Natasha, we're going to wind up with the stuff that Mordecai Richler used to write about in the United States, right? So we're going to have an arm wrestle over, ye old orchard pub, right? And we're right back. You know, I can hardly wait for Pastigate to be litigated all over again. So in my experience, you know, the parrot, I don't know if you remember the CBS 60 Minutes piece where they followed around an inspector and a language cop, and they called him Inspector Clouseau, and the bit about the parrot made it into American television. That's when everybody in Quebec City cringes. People who are very, you know, blustery and say, "Oh, we're just going to do this, and too bad if you don't like it." When there's pushback that actually makes it into the American papers, they get really, really nervous. When the United Nations ruled that Quebec's language laws went against basic rules of the United Nations in terms of freedom of expression, that's when the Quebec government had to back off, stopped using the notwithstanding clause, and came up with a bill that allowed for the use of both languages on signs with French predominant, as that was allowed by the Supreme Court. So stay tuned, because when this stuff starts hitting the papers and starts winding up in The Guardian in the UK, or, you know, in the New York Times, that's when Legault's going to move in. Because the guy who's going to be pushing Legault on this, it's not his language minister, Roberge, it's Pierre Fitzgibbon, who's going to say, really? Like, I'm trying to attract this XYZ business with 4,000 of the best jobs we've ever had, and this is what they're reading on the front page in New York. This is where this stuff gets complicated for them.
Okay. Meanwhile, Fitzgibbon
that
now
guy who
quoted
said,
as saying, "If you want to come here, you better learn French."
If you don't learn French, go home.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right.
Well, I think he was referring to the president of Air Canada, frankly. You know, but
I don't know.
Still,
Tom, thank you.